Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well today, and we are bringing you a fun Ordnance build on Vex that does not utilize any kind of bug damage interactions, exploits, or the infamous crit knife. This build is very strong and excels at both mobbing and bossing, while bossing takes minimal prep to get the damage really going if you're using the most optimal shield, of which there can be a few that you use. But we will discuss that during the gear portion of this video. Now, as with most of my builds, they lack perfect gear, so there's always more you can achieve as far as performance goes than what you're seeing in the video if you happen to get better gear than I had at the time of recording. We also do a lot of math when testing these builds, and the damage formula did just recently get posted by Lazy Data, so make sure to check out his channel and show him some love for the video, but the short of it is that everything in the game that is an increase to damage is contributing additively to the damage formula, except for gun damage on your enhancements in particular, which is its own separate multiplicative bonus, and all forms of bonus damage, which will collectively add themselves together before serving as yet another separate multiplicative bonus in the formula. With this information in mind, we made sacrifices and changes to our skill trees to maximize our total damage, so if you have any questions as to why we don't take certain skills, that's usually why. But if you want to ask me live, feel free to check out my streams with my Twitch link in the description below. Now, let's jump into the skills and explain what all we took. Now, to start off our skills, we're actually going to talk about Red Tree. We have 5 points in this tree and only 5 points in this tree, and we put it into Grave Sustenance because this is what's going to allow us to stay in our action skill, which is essential to the build for an indefinite amount of time as long as we keep hitting crits or getting kills. Exceptionally strong during mobbing and still very useful during bossing as well, though hopefully the boss isn't alive long enough for you to fully benefit from this. With Green Tree, though, we go into splash damage immediately. Now it says 20 on the box, but keep in mind this is doubled when you're in your action skill. And for the entirety of this build's gameplay loop, you're going to be in your action skill, so this is really 40%. Then we put 5 points into Bloodletter. Now this is bleed. We are not benefiting from Keen Mind or Prismatic Ichor, so it cannot infinitely, recursively proc itself. So this is not the bugged interaction. Don't just go thinking that it uses bleed, so it must be the bugged interaction. It is not. Once the nerfs do hit, this should be unaffected because this is not using any kind of unintended interaction whatsoever. This is just the standalone bleed skill, of which 30% of our gun damage will be applied to this, so it will still hit like a truck whenever it procs because we are using Ordnance for it. Then we take material components for the increased kinetic damage and kinetic status effect. Not only does this increase our bleed damage, but it increases the base damage of our Ordnance, as it will be kinetic. Then we have 5 points in target prescience because we are using a rocket, so this is going to be where the majority of our crit chance comes to, along with our specializations, but we'll cover that later. Then we put 5 points into Drink Full for fire rate. Now, the only reason we're taking Drink Full is so that whenever we aren't using our Ordnance, our weapons can still fire quite effectively and still perform on their own. And I didn't want to take Keen Mind because I didn't want to use the bugged interaction that allows infinite recursive damage from bleed. Then this is essential. You want to put 1 point in Phase Pocket because this is going to, when you have your action skill active, allow you to exceed your maximum ammo for the Ordnance we're using. We will talk more about that in gear, but this is extremely important. Make sure you have Phase Pocket. Mortal Terror, of course, is how we trigger our kill skill, of which we only have 1, which again is going to be Grave Sustenance, but this will allow us to indefinitely use our action skill during a boss fight. Now again, hopefully the boss isn't long enough for you to take full advantage of this, but if need be, it will keep you in your action skill. Then in the right tree, we have Ars Arcana, which increases skill damage, just extra damage with our Incarnate if we're using it, more useful than our Grave Vitality kill skill, in my opinion. Then we have Essence Leech, which just gives us lifesteal, and lifesteal is going to be very important here. Now, this is 20% when our action skill is active, and the reason this is so important is because Blood is Power, when we have 3 points in it, gives us 3 times our lifesteal as bonus kinetic damage. Now, remember what I said about bonus damage being a multiplicative bonus in your damage formula? This means that we have 60% kinetic damage, bonus kinetic damage, as a multiplicative bonus. So that does a lot of heavy lifting. Now, as far as questions go, I'm sure some people are asking why I don't have another 5 points in Leeching Attunement to bump that up to 90%, because we'd have 30% lifesteal times 3. and why we aren't taking enchantment for bonus kinetic damage. And that's simply because of point allocation. Now, you can tidy up a few points here and there. Again, if you want it to be a primarily boss-focused build, you could take all 5 points out of Grave Sustenance, also take out 5 points for Mortal Terror. I would recommend putting the points you need. Honestly, real talk, I don't think you need a capstone for this build. So if you just want to take the 5 points out of Mortal Terror, feel free to just do that and have 10 extra points to reallocate. I would put 5 points into Leeching Attunement, and I would put 5 points into Enchantment. But we're going to talk about gear, why I'm not going to do that as well. But if you only want to specialize in bossing, you don't care about mobbing whatsoever, I would probably take 5 points out of Grave Sustenance, put them in Enchantment, and take 5 points out of Mortal Terror and put them into Leeching Attunement, as that will significantly increase your overall damage at the cost of some convenience. As far as specialization goes, you want to invest heavily into Survivor and Brute, and mainly so you can get the Gadgeteer online. That's going to be 60 points, quite a hefty investment, because you also want to get Best Defense and Riddle You This. Now, the reason we go down Gadgeteer is because Full Spectrum Arsenal makes our Ordnance gain 50% of our increases to gun damage, which is really strong, but the real kicker is Fragmentation Payload, which gives it even more of a chance to critically hit. That stacks with our skill tree, so we're at a 20% on this just to critically hit with our Ordnance, and on top of that, it massively boosts our critical hit damage with Ordnance as well. Now, there is a shield we're going to be using that does drain your shields, and our shield is going to be higher than our maximum HP, so Best Defense might not always be active if you're going to go with one of the 3 shields that we're going to be talking about in this video, but if you're looking to switch this out, I would probably recommend becking into In the Zone, and if you're too lazy or like it's not optimal enough to like aim down sights, which I probably am, I wouldn't like to do this, but you can get a substantial bonus from this. If you don't want to go In the Zone though, you could definitely go Bullet Train, but again, that's even heavier point investment, and I'm not even that far yet. So if you really just want to go with what I have here, you should be fine, even if Best Defense isn't always active. But if you really just want to optimize it 100%, definitely swap out Best Defense if you're going to be running Protean Cell, which is a shield we're going to be talking about, and either take In the Zone or Bullet Train. Alright, talking about gear, first before we go over weapons, let's just go over what we're doing for firmware. We're going to put 2 points in Gadget Ahoy for the 20% increased Ordnance damage. The Ordnance cooldown is also nice. Airstrike, now this one can be a double-edged sword because it does increase splash damage by another 20%, but that splash radius is huge, and you won't be able to see it. Sometimes you'll just shoot and you'll go down. So make sure you are putting enough distance between where your rocket is landing and where you are, because this will get you more often than not. You're going to kind of have to feel it out. It could be a little bit of growing pain, but that 20% extra splash damage is worth, because with 1 point in Get Throwing, we get an extra 10% Ordnance damage. You add all these up, because like I said, they're all additive, so it doesn't matter. Ordnance and Splash and Ordnance damage are all going to add together to get you a nice 50% bonus on top of that. So really, really good to have a 2-2-1 with Gadget Ahoy, Airstrike, and Get Throwing as your firmware, in my opinion. Now, as far as guns go, use whatever you like, preferably something with splash damage. Same as my previous build, I'm a big fan of the Wombo Combo and Chaosin. These benefit from our splash damage bonuses, not from our Ordnance bonuses, but we do have a lot of splash damage investment in the build. So having splash damage on our guns for whenever we don't have Ordnance up, again, that will be rare, but whenever we don't have Ordnance up, you will be getting benefits on these weapons. Rep kit, we stick with Warpaint, of course. I love Warpaint. This thing is just incredible. The only other one I would change out for this is maybe get the AF100 from Rock and Roller. That increases the effects, the timer on your effects from your rep kit. And then I would probably go with increased splash damage if you find that on here. That's the only change I would make. But honestly, I don't really use my rep kit that much during this build. I could obviously eke out more damage if I wanted to go down that route. I could probably also find one with lifesteal on it, and that would go harder into my Blood is Power skill from the skill tree, therefore increasing my damage a lot more. But honestly, I'm not using this too often. I find mixing this in just takes up more time. I will probably still farm for one if I want to optimize this build, and I recommend you do too if you want to make this build even stronger, but here's proof that you don't need perfect gear to make it work. But again, if you're looking for a recommendation for this slot, I highly recommend either a purple rep kit that has both splash damage and lifesteal on it, or if you're going to go for a legendary rep kit, get the AF100 and get splash damage on it. Now this is the bread and butter. This is what we are doing all our damage with. It is a Torg rocket launcher called the Honey Bunches. Now, The real important thing here is triple barrel. Triple barrel rockets have extremely high damage. There's a few in the game. I don't think they're all honey bunches, but I found a honey bunches early on when I first played the game in the first week of its release, and it was shredding everything. So I wanted to make that work in endgame, picked one of these up, and I based the entirety of the build around it. So it has a maximum ammo of 6, and when you charge it up to fire, it does a ton of damage. The problem is, it uses up all 6 shots, and that is why we spec'd into Phase Pocket, because when you pop your action skill, you get a 20% increase to magazine size. That bumps this up to 7. It still only charges up to 6. It won't empty the whole thing. You can't charge it past 6, so you will have one more in the mag. And because we're using Witchy Trigger Finger as our augment, anytime we hit an enemy with our Eldritch Blast, it will refill our gun's magazine. This does count as a gun, and it will refill it. So you shoot your burst, Witchy Trigger Finger. Shoot your burst, Witchy Trigger Finger, until the boss or whatever you're planning on killing dies. Whenever you're mobbing, I would recommend not charging it up, because one rocket will usually be enough to kill any fodder. Half a burst or just 3 rockets fired off separately is enough to kill any kind of elites on the field, and only really recommend charging it up for bosses / mini bosses. As far as class mod goes, this is not optimized for myself either, but I went with Technomancer just so that our Eldritch Blast could hit harder. I've been farming non-stop for a better class mod, but I really lucked out having splash damage and ordnance damage, especially with that red tree perk, Blast Rights, because Blast Rights makes it so that whenever I pull out ordnance, I get Overshield. We'll talk more about Overshield here in just a sec, because I would personally recommend running, if you don't want to run this, that is, I would recommend running Teen Witch and still look for like a lifesteal or ordnance / splash damage on that. But what I really recommend is a commander mod. If you can find a perfect commander mod here, I think this is stronger than any legendary mod for this build. For those who are unaware, you can only get 2 passives on legendaries, and I think that there's limited passive pools on legendaries, but don't quote me on that. This purple item, though, can have 3 passives, and the commander mod in particular can roll 2 really strong skills on it. Because not only can you also get Overshield, but you get Overprotective, so it procs on Kill Skill, and if you're running our original build, you're going to be proccing Kill Skills pretty easily, and Overshield's important. On top of that, it can also run Grave Implements, and Grave Implements is one of the strongest sources of additive damage in Vex's entire kit. This goes up to 60% at max stacks, and if you end up getting Grave Power, it goes to 120%. Unfortunately, we don't have the points to spend on Grave Power, so getting this thing just to level 5, or any kind of progress in it whatsoever, from this class mod, for instance, I wish those numbers were reversed and it was 5-2 the other way, that would be a massive increase to your additive damage, which would substantially increase the overall damage you're dealing here. It would make it look far stronger than what I've previewed of the build so far in my boss killing clips. As far as passives go, I would probably look for, Ordnance critical hit chance is great. Instead of shotgun damage, I'd probably just like to see ordnance damage and maybe splash damage. Those are probably what I would go for. And if you're not going to go ordnance critical hit chance because you think you're hitting hard enough already, I would just go for gun, ordnance, splash. That would be the god roll in my opinion. And I would like to get more points into Grave Implements instead of Overprotective. But Overprotective and Grave Implements, I would say both of those are essential on this class mod if you're going to run that. Now here's where we get into the real meat and potatoes of variety for this build. Now, Protean Cell is your best in slot option for damage, because whenever you ground slam, you get 40% increased, or 40% bonus shock damage, sorry, and you know how strong bonus damage is, we've been talking about this. That's a huge number, and that'll stack with Blood is Power. Now, the downside is that when you ground slam, your shield will drain over time, and any damage you take is dealt directly to your health bar. So if you do take damage while this is active, odds are you're hitting the ground. That's fight for your lifetime right there. Again, you can't beat this. If you want to be less glass cannony, you can still get a ton of damage out if you run a Watts for Dinner. This is because whenever you have an Overshield, you have 25% bonus shock damage, and that's where the bonuses from Overprotective and Blast Rights come in. Let's go back to our red tree. Whenever I use Ordnance, get an Overshield with my current class mod. But if I were to find a good Commander class mod, again, purple class mod, 1 point in overprotective would be enough, because just simply shooting at the boss with my rocket and hitting crits would get me overshield and would give me that 25% bonus shock damage. Very strong. Plus, it's just really strong in terms of survivability as well. So really, this is kind of what I would recommend unless you want to be hyper aggressive and maximize your damage. Then I would recommend running Protein Cell, but What's for Dinner is really a safe bet. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with a Fireworks. I would only recommend running this for mobbing. This can actually have a lot of practical use in boss fights like Backhive that spawn a bunch of racks, although they don't technically count as enemies. But anytime that there's a boss fight with enemies that you can kill, Idolator Soul's a great example. Whenever you kill an enemy there, it's just going to wipe all of the little tiny adds off the map, and all of those orbs will come in to hit the main boss. So really strong for mobbing and has practical use for boss fights with a lot of adds around. But truthfully, What's for Dinner is the best neutral option here. If you're just going for a one size fits all type shield, What's for Dinner is your go-to. Now the clips I did show you are being done with the Protein Cell, because that's the highest possible damage you can get on a shield. But that's really your 3 options for shields. Then your enhancement. So your enhancement, fun fact about Ordnance, unfortunately, is that they can't benefit from enhancement perks, but they can still benefit from the passives. So for example, always want gun damage on here. Always. Gun damage is, like I said earlier, multiplicative when on an enhancement. Then, I don't know what else you can run on these slots. I'm pretty sure they have more isolated pools. But splash damage, I know you can roll splash damage on some of these things. Splash damage is very good, and probably just gun critical damage, if I were to guess. Gun splash, gun critical. That's probably what I'd look for in terms of passes. But like I said, I don't have perfect gear. You could farm out better gear than I have. With what I'm running right now, I'm able to shred through everything in the game. So you can do even more damage if you farm out better gear. Not that I think you need it. As far as gameplay loop goes, it's incredibly simplistic this time around. For mobbing, just pop your action skill and kill enemies with your rocket. I'd recommend shooting only a single time. That's usually all it takes to kill enemies. Even elites sometimes fall down in one hit. At most, charge up like 2 or 3 shots for elites. But keep in mind, remember to use your Eldritch Blast every couple of shots, because that's how you refill your rocket. Every time you hit an enemy with Eldritch Blast, you also get 15% increased damage for a duration, stacking up to 45%, so your rocket's also going to hit substantially harder per Eldritch Blast you use. For bossing, you just pop your action skill and prep whatever damage strat you're going for. Either Ground Slam with Protein Cell, or get Overshields with What's for Dinner. Then use your rep kit if you farmed one out with passives you like. Take out your rocket and just charge it up, shoot, Eldritch Blast, and repeat until whatever you're shooting at is dead. And there's the build. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider leaving a like and comment, as that helps the channel out a lot, and I would appreciate it greatly. If you want to catch me live, check my Twitch in the description below, and feel free to join my Discord while you're down there as well if you have any questions or want to talk Borderlands. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day. I'm Haderaxe, signing out. Peace.